poem called Lunatic. I stood eating moonlight until it broke my jaw. Like any ray, the pain both pulls and fastens in a circle. You move and do not move. Late winter night burns a ring of red onto clouds. They wander west to east. Her wounded face is too close to who you think you are, distracting you from moon, shaft, and circle. They move you quietly beyond belief as known, crescendo of hush. Nothing sweet matches the savor of lunar textures, there but not there, sprouting dark like mushrooms between veiled stars. Spica and Arcturus speak or do not speak. Someone really knows. I wonder, open-mouthed, matching this moon, as though the last bite, a silence or a howl, could clutch a moment between something and nothing, to gasp, to flood, and spin this world.
All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Poets in Montana. I'm Mark Gibbons, and today my guest is David Moore. You just heard him read you Lunatic, a new poem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for joining me for this affair. And I was struck, I guess, just by listening, you know, poetry being that oral art form. You've got a great voice, man.
Shucks.
And articulation. Yeah,
I appreciate
it's
that.
wonderful to sound. And of course, you are a professor emeritus at the University of Montana.
Emeritus.
Emeritus, there you go. Teach me how to pronounce words.
Sure.
In the humanities or?
In the English department.
In the English department,
Mm-hmm.
okay. See, I'm just in the English department too. I never took a class from you. I was there briefly, I guess.
I came back to Montana in '99 and taught there till 2018
Okay.
at UM.
Yeah. In '99, I guess, I was there. No, I wasn't there. No, you were not there. See, that makes me feel better. So now I feel like I didn't like dodge you or anything. So what?
Watch out for that guy.
Yeah, and did you have any particular focus? Did you run the gamut in the English department, or?
I taught for 44 years, and I started at University of South Dakota in graduate school, mm-hmm. and Native American literature became my focus. Mm-hmm. And I kind of realized after decades that my role was kind of liaison, because I don't claim to speak for, even interpret Native American voices.
Right.
But that literature is speaking to Americans. And
Mm-hmm.
so I tried to be a kind of sounding board for that.
Right. And that was back in the 60s.
Started in Indian country in 1969 when I was 18.
Yeah.
And then in the 70s I was at South Dakota, University of South Dakota.
Right. When really the whole concept of Native American literature was being introduced.
That's true, yeah.
To the English.
Mama Day's Housemaid of Dawn won the Pulitzer in 1969, and
Right.
that opened the floodgates.
Right. Yeah.
Jim Welch and Leslie Silko, they were publishing in the 70s. And
Right.
yeah. Louise
Yeah.
Erdrich came soon after.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love all that stuff, man.
Oh my God.
They definitely, all those authors speak.
Yeah. There's something compelling
Yeah.
about it.
Because it's so grounded, it's so tied to the earth,
Yeah.
as we are. So,
Right.
I mean, it's just natural
Can't help it.
that regardless of your background, that you would be drawn to that, I would think. you know.
Absolutely, yeah. Spent a lot of time as a kid in the woods in the Northwest, and yeah, just.
So where did you grow up?
Berkeley, California, and New York City, but all the summers growing up on Hood Canal in the Puget Sound area.
Okay.
And so I feel pretty at home, both in the woods and in Times Square.
Yeah, there you go, downtown.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So so you were, I mean, were you always drawn to poetry as a?
You know, my folks were part of the Rexroth Circle in San Francisco in the
wow.
40s and 50s. And I grew up listening to those poetic voices.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, couldn't help myself.
That's why you have that voice.
Yeah.
And so your dad was a poet.
I have 4 dads and 4 mothers, and both my dad, Richard Moore, is a published poet. Lewis Hill, his best buddy, they, with my mom, co-founded Pacifica Radio back in the day, and that was all about putting forward those voices on the listener-sponsored airwaves.
Cool.
Yeah.
And that was out in the
Bay Area.
In the Bay Area. Okay.
Yeah. So my dad, Richard Moore, published a couple of books of poems. I could read one of his. Yeah, Dad retired from public television, and he did a whole series for WNET on poets with Robert Duncan and Toni Morrison in the early days. And this...
In the Bay Area.
Yeah, and he, well, Frank O'Hara and others all over the country, but when he retired at age 70, he devoted himself to poetry.
Okay.
And he got 2 books out of it and worked with Brenda Hillman and Robert Haas and folks out there. And this is just a beautiful poem from his book, Writing the Silences, published University of California Press. It's called A Funeral of Memory. Immaculately buried memory sets unworkable as past life, retrievable at will. Thinking of God, I draw a blank. I say, enter thin needle of infinite night. And so it is. The set is over full. Calling on God, I enter the set called silence. Once in the labyrinth, old alley of no exit, there is only the center and the deception of place. Here everything happens and nothing is foretold. Listening for God, I hear my footsteps vanishing. Living in silence, I recall what I cannot hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
He was a very philosophical poet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The philosophical question.
Sure. Yeah. But a wonderful
Yeah.
legacy, really.
Yeah,
Great.
totally. Yeah, that's very cool. Well, how about another
Sure.
another poem?
This is a little untitled thing from just this spring. Short poem. Who will cheer me on in my need to do nothing, to get nothing done, in my desire to be still, to not write this poem?
You'll cheer yourself on.
There you go. It's a retirement poem, I don't know.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in all those wonderful moments of doing nothing in silence, or whatever you want to call it, your own little time frame.
Yeah.
You don't write that many poems, but you get a poem out of it usually.
There you go. Writing the silences, as he says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You got another one?
Sure. This is called This Lunar Eclipse. We stand in this in-between, sun at our backs pulling us, night in our eyes, incinerating mind, moon in every river running red, cold fire slowly winking at us. We are quick in winter. Dark before dawn, we fly earth times 10 this instant, this light, behind our shoulder, touches moon, and returns us to the shadow and the halo of who we were.
Is that a newer poem?
What's that?
Is that a newer poem?
Yeah, that's November 22. I think
Yeah.
we were all sitting out in Kiwanis Park, a whole
Okay.
crowd of people watching the eclipse.
Right, right, right. I know several people drove down to Idaho.
Oh, that's right.
To get the real
Yeah, right.
full-on
The full 360
darkness,
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, for how many ages have eclipses put things in perspective for people?
Right.
Yeah.
And we get a lot of lunar ones.
Yeah.
I mean, those are all, and we get so many of those. Those
Right.
are always
Right.
memorable. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. This one is a recent poem too, but it's based on the 9/11 catastrophe.
Okay.
I was watching with our son a documentary called 9/11 One Day in America by Daniel Bogado. And this poem came out of it.
Did anything come out of it closer to the time frame too? Did you write about it back then? Just curious.
That's a good question. I don't think so. You know,
Yeah.
I remember the minute it happened. I remember
Totally.
I was teaching here at UM,
Right.
and I was in the UC, and the cameras were on. The first plane hit when I was at home. I went into campus and was watching the TV as the second plane hit. You know,
Yeah. Right.
and pretty memorable.
Yeah.
Where were you when the lights went out? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Well, where I was is I was working too, but I was moving furniture for somebody. It was a military move too, and it was down in the person was down in Lolo, and so
Oh, my.
I went down there with a crew of guys. By the time we left, we knew something had happened at that time, that 8 o'clock,
Right.
just before
10
whenever.
minutes to 8. I
Yeah,
remember.
exactly.
Yeah.
The first plane hit, and everybody was like, and so we got all of our stuff together, and we drove down, and we came into this house. You go into someone's house and
Right.
start giving them the scoop on what's going to happen. We were just going to pack for the first couple of days,
Right.
pack stuff in boxes and stuff.
Yeah, major
and get a
move.
tour and all that. And and the woman was, of course, everybody was glued to the tube. And by the time we were looking, the second plane hit.
Oh, man.
And,
Yeah.
it was. So I did it because I had to kind of work through it, and because it was all going on around, and then all the aftermath of the input afterwards. I did get a poem out of it at that time.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, I'd love to
Yeah.
hear it.
Yeah. At some time I'll pull it out for you.
I remember all the news announcers saying, America will never be the same. And I think they're right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like Pearl Harbor. It's
Right.
it's those kinds of moments.
Feeling of
Right.
vulnerability.
Yeah,
fragility.
and one of the young guys that a good friend of mine who he was he's quite a bit younger than me, and so he was full of that youthful testosterone and rage
Oh.
at the whole thing. He was ready to. He's a poet.
Oh.
But he was ready to join the military and go do what
Well,
could be
you and
done.
I know that poets are secretly militants,
And it was like, no, that wasn't my reaction. My reaction was more like, yeah, well, who's surprised about that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Yeah.
like, this has been coming a long time as far as I could see. I'm
You
surprised
don't
it
want to
didn't
say
happen
we had
before
it
now.
coming, but it's
Well,
been coming.
I was not surprised.
Right.
mean,
I had the same feeling.
I felt bad, of
Right.
course.
Oh,
But I sure wasn't shocked.
well, and I have stood on the top of the World Trade Center more than once,
Oh, wow.
just watching the view.
Yeah.
You don't want to
Well, take us there.
take that drive or that dive. So, little thing mentioning the documentary by Daniel Bogado. And the title, I guess I sort of came up with this poem the morning after in a kind of half dream. Title is Half Dream in a Cloud of Cement. 3 parts. North Tower. Parade of shadows, each a scream, trailing light. Not light casting shadows, but dark figures trailing something bright. They race single file down stairway B into billows of rubble, rising to meet them. South Tower. Vacuum of fire inhales shattered breath. Groans of steel swallow the shouts in the crescendo. 3,000 sighs explode in a cloud that crawls on dusty ironwork into silence. Pentagon. And some never quite buried in empty air, or underneath a wounded dark star, or in a cornfield, or murderous martyrs in love with no exit. Their razor box cutters committed to gravity, swan dive down collapsing columns of hell for centuries. Human flesh in the machinery of history.
Yeah, that's good, man. Try to capture that. Gives us pause.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are no words, really, for that kind of loss.
No, I mean, it's like anything that's unexplainable, like suicide or things where you just try to, come up with something to say, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I like I say, I wasn't truly surprised because of our business that
Right.
we've done.
Yeah.
around the world and in different
Right.
places, and then there's that other angle that we don't talk about maybe as often as I think we probably should. Stick my foot in my mouth again. It's that zealot, that religious fervor, that business of, my way or the highway that we see going on. All around us, this fundamentalism, doesn't matter what the religion is and where that leads to, and these kinds of actions a lot
in
of
the
times.
Montana legislature.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been interfering as a nation around the world with violence for more than a century.
Yeah, right.
And you and I both knew it had to come back on us.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, we've been insulated for a long time, I guess, from that kind of thing, and that's
Sure.
why it wasn't necessarily a shock, because of the long tradition of.
And I gotta say, I don't end on doom in my own thinking about this. I think we're, as a human race, we're really good at learning the hard way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But we do learn, and I think, it takes centuries, but that was a wake-up call.
Yeah, right. And it does take hard realities, it seems like, for us to learn.
Yeah. Whap!
And then time, we tend to forget, and generations that maybe don't
For
know
sure. Yeah.
part of that, and then others that just get caught up in their own personal selfish behavior. And
Yeah. We're all pretty good at that.
yeah.
Indeed.
Well, how about a lighter poem? How about like that anti-poem, or
Oh, yeah, that's
one
a
of
good
those?
idea.
Because those are just some great voice poems. I should mention that you, when I asked you about what you might be reading today, you don't have a little book of poems, do you? Or do
I
you?
don't.
Yeah.
I sort of like my dad, Richard Moore, I kind of postponed poetry till retirement.
Right.
been keeping at it through the decades, but I guess I can claim to be a professional, though, because I sent out 12 submissions of this manuscript of the Living on Indian Land, and not one of them even acknowledged receipt.
Oh, you're in the club then.
Yeah.
At least I'm in that club.
You know, rejection slips make you a pro, so I got it.
Yeah.
But it's easy. I mean, clearly the manuscript is twice as long as anybody wants, and the introduction is too long. So I'm going to just cut it in half and send it out again.
Yeah,
And we'll see what happens.
You know, find out. You know, maybe. I mean, a lot of it, of course, I think is connections and that kind of thing. You know.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, but
true,
yeah,
too.
if you can, a smaller group of things are usually a better foot in the door if you don't know somebody you're sending
Right.
to. Or
Sure. Yeah, I have some poems published, and it was partly thanks to dear Roger Dunsmore, you know.
right.
And you're right, it helps to who you know. So this is called Auntie Betty's Birthday Bash.
Yeah.
And this is, it's pretty self-explanatory. Kind of a narrative poem. Auntie Betty's Birthday Bash. Late last night, we two-stepped to Cowboy Swing by the Crow Country Band at Billings Legion Hall, with a couple hundred mixed-blood Indians jitterbugging to pedal steel, fiddle, drums, keyboard, guitar. The old tunes lift boots on the dance floor for Auntie Betty's 90th birthday bash. Living and dying by the choices I've made. Let them gospel hymns sing me back home. I fall to pieces, crazy. Please release me, let me go. In the mood. One of her 10 kids, now grown old, dances Betty in a wheelchair through the crowd, till she can hardly breathe, even with the oxygen tube, though she takes the mic in the clamor and shouts, "Never marry a Frenchman, he was horny." Behind the music on the back wall, among the Legion flags and festive lights, a glass case mounts a Japanese carbine with bayonet. Above a samurai sword with finely woven handle, tsuka, threading iridescent black and green in off-white silk, and a plain polished wooden scabbard, saya, both donated by a vet from the 82-day battle for Okinawa in 1945, when she was almost 18 and already married nearly a year. Her great-granddaughter announces through the microphone over the din, "Auntie Betty says she loves us all." Yeah.
All right.
That's my wife's aunt. Yeah.
Auntie Betty.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It reminded me. Do you remember did you ever meet the Tom Pablo?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Sure.
you familiar with his work?
Not
As a
really.
poet? Well, and of course I don't know if it's the same Tom Pablo, but I'm
There's
sure
more
it
than one.
is.
That's true.
Yeah, because that's like
That's a big
Jack
name up
Joyce. You know, it's like, oh my God.
Up on the flathead.
Yeah, but he lived because I lived in Pablo, and he lived not too far away, kind of like down Corville Road or one of those roads that went back towards the mountains back there.
Yeah.
And anyway, he gave me a handmade collection of his poems.
Oh, golly.
And you know, and
Whoa.
there was leather bound, you know, and beaded, and the artwork
Nice.
on there. I remember. I don't know if he did the artwork. but it was all original. You know, it was
Yeah.
all
Boy, that's a
handmade
treasure.
thing. Yeah,
Wow.
and the poems were, you know, they were old style, you know, English lit sort of
Rhymey.
quatrain, A-B type rhyme scheme things.
From boarding school days.
Yeah, and they were, a lot of them were military poems because he'd served.
Yeah.
And he was a vet, and he was, you know, a warrior. He was very proud of
That's right.
what he had done, and so a lot of the poems were about his family, and then also about his service and his experiences. So yeah, I just thought maybe you might have bumped into him.
Yeah, I taught at Salish Kootenai College for almost 10 years and got to know some of those families up there.
Right.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah, it was a good place. My kids were young up there.
How about another one here? This one is for Vic Charlo.
Yeah,
Speaking
yeah.
of our
Yeah,
pals up
Vic
there.
and April were on here with us.
Oh,
yeah, we did
I've
one
gotta
with
look
them.
that up.
Yeah, and of course
Good.
April, you know, read poems in the
Right.
Salish, and
perfect. Well, this is my response to a Vic Charlo poetry reading. I didn't realize it's quite a longer poem, almost 2 pages. And indeed, April was translating.
yeah.
But I think he dropped the book at some point off the podium, or the manuscript and papers went everywhere.
Oh, all right. Before the book maybe was bound. Or
Right,
something, yeah.
and I just so admire his voice. My
Yeah.
God, what a poet. And you know, well, it's in here. He's in the legacy of chiefs up in that tribe.
Right.
So, title of this is Knock Over the Book for Vic Charlo and the Two Eagle River School. Your old folks crossed Higgins Bridge in Salish tears. Your brother raised the Iwo Jima flag long after Hellgate treaties and other ambushes. You wonder aloud to Agnes about losing the tongue to tell the tale in enemy script. Yet translations of April make seasons good enough, puche. We remake the day the Lord hath made. A renegade Indian priest must know a thing or two about bones that breathe, this river of blood flowing down the mind, washing errors with grief and jokes. You sing, and speaking bears stand up. You speak, and buffalo return. Generous invitation powers mountain to echo. Snipe thrumming in sky, blinking lights at the Dixon bar. Your rolling eyes and rolling words, atmosphere of loss, reveal the pulse we always were, even free to laugh when you spilled pages on the floor and began again. You say you'll miss those looser days. We hear the long line of chiefs speaking in your growl. Laughter with you undercut belief that we could own this land. Now you hold your book in your hand. You step across the bridge with your grandmothers. We hear their song and yours. On ground beside Little Bull Trout River, we gather now to words your daughter gives us of the people's tongue. How can we not celebrate the day you pool us on the river shore? March us with your people down the years and back, the beat of air a reminder of who we are. Like any poet, you push words into bone. Inside skin is every singer's dream. Music is tissue, food for blood, breath from a page, the sacrament. They call it real. Like any bird, we stretch brittle beaks to catch the shift in pitiful lives when two eagles sing that song. And you ask more of us. Uncles nudge, The hesitant edge of emptiness draws us out. Bright head and tail, dark rustle of enormous wings drop away like music before and after, calling us in guttural coos, in airborne screams, to break beyond the words, together make it fact, to span. This then in sadness more than anyone can write. You always owned the Yankees under that blue cap. Now stories cross from shore to shore. They own us all. The blood-red land translating air. Unspeakables bridging a river that runs, rewinding the world.
Nice. Nice. Yeah.
Never see Vic without that Yankees cap.
Yeah, and I was reminded of you know, well, one of the things that the stories that Vic and April told and that when we were talking was about their going to I'm pretty sure it was Washington, D.C. I mean, you were talking about their stories shore to shore in your poem there in the end, and reading for, you know, like thousands of people, and just like blew Vic away, you know. It was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
I've never been and seen a group like that. You know?
I just been thinking about him lately. I gotta go look him up.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. Well, they were doing great when we saw them. That wasn't too long ago.
Oh, good. I'm really glad to hear that.
And wanting to go back out on tour.
Oh,
April was busy, so she was going to have to make some time, as I
sure.
recall.
Well, he's can't be kept down, I'm sure. Here's one. I'm grateful in all of this teaching and life and conferencing to have known Vic, and Simon Ortiz is another whom I deeply admire.
Right.
His work just really gets to the heart of the American question. He's got a book called Sand Creek, after Sand Creek, about that amazing massacre in 1864, I think it was, in Colorado. So this is, you could call it the title poem of this manuscript, called Living on Indian Land.
Okay.
The manuscript adds stolen in front of that. So this is Living on Indian Land for Simon Ortiz. And I'm sorry, this isn't upbeat.
Oh, well,
That's not part of the poem, but I'll...
They expect that, I think.
Yeah. Living on Indian Land for Simon Ortiz. Not only stolen, but soaked in massacre and mutilation, where Simon could not speak those greasy words. I, herself, her generations, I. But brandished compassion for bloodlusters. Sand Creek, Marias River, Wounded Knee, My Lai. History breaks down in the VA hospital, where white and Indian reduced to smoke in slanted light and manifest terror marks the ground of our longings, slowly sinking with drum song poems.
I remember one of the poems that I used to share with young people, teaching, you know, kids in the school, was my father's. It's a Simon Ortiz poem.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
My father's talking about his dad, you know, growing corn.
Oh, right.
And
Right, they're in
my
there.
father's.
I can't catch it up.
Anyway, it's a wonderful poem, and
Yeah.
and it always really resonates with kids. You know,
Sure.
You know, it's a
That's a wonderful thing.
relationship between a child and their father.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here's one. that uses a little Lakota in the title. It's called Mahpia Oyate, which means cloud people. But the title is Mahpia Oyate, Facts. Cloud people cycle us, water sifting river rocks. We drum your tears, thunder every cell. You know we don't know who we are. Sheltered lightning, cells float skyward, rising continents, sorrow and bliss, blanket and shroud, water thrums, dark thanks, moist fear, enthusiastic, ancestor breath kisses, bodies live, bodies long, dead, lifted, rainy air, never empty, brain dust, grave-washed molecules, mind and memory, fingertips, a million moments touch. All of that's in the clouds.
Yeah, there you go.
Can't help it.
Here's a question that, of course, it came to mind when I was reading the manuscript, and in today's reality of what everybody likes to call cancel culture.
Oh dear.
And rewriting history and oftentimes in art, not just history, but art.
Sure.
You know, canceling it because of something comes to light about an artist and the way that they lived their life in 1320 or 1850 or whatever,
Right.
or 1989
Sure.
for that matter. And so I mean, I know you have been, like you say, involved with Native communities across the country for 50 years, but have you ever received any pushback for writing
Definitely.
what appear to be
Sure.
Indian poems?
Oh yeah. And I haven't published it yet, so I expect more pushback.
Yeah, right.
But in classes, I've had Native students call me to account for even teaching Native Lit.
Right.
And I totally get it. I mean, colonial history is real, and co-optation and oppression are real.
Right.
And as I try to sort out in this manuscript, try to figure out these Native writers have been singing to America and trying to get America's attention.
Right. Right.
Instead of being erased by manifest destiny.
Right.
And so what's the next step for the American ear? How do you listen to that? How do you respond? How do you engage with those voices? And I'm sure I make mistakes, but I'm sure trying not to co-opt. I mean, I do feel, somebody called me a cultural half-breed once upon a time, because I was pretty darn young and in formation when I was invited into Lakota ceremonial life. And plus, as you say, we're all grounded. And the trick is to really recognize America's usurpation of this land. And I mean, I'm all for tribal sovereignty, and it currently, legally, supersedes state sovereignty. The tribes do not have to communicate with the states. They can communicate with the feds.
Right.
Because they are in tribal sovereign nations.
Right.
And so I can see a future America that isn't very visible at the moment, but that where tribal sovereignty is reinstituted. And the 50 states might look different.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Just suggesting a radical approach.
Yeah.
And I think when in my classes, when students resented my inserting my voice into this conversation, I tried to stay humble and tried to explain what I'm trying to explain here, that
Right.
I think I'm part of this dialogue and I'm trying to engage it in an honest way. And that doesn't mean that I think America is ready for that, that this current America is worthy of claiming to really engage Native sovereignty yet. It's still, clamping
Right.
down.
Right. But as far as, this birth or rebirth or whatever of Native American literature, which happened 50, 60 years ago and has been ongoing.
Sure.
I mean, it took the efforts of a lot of different people with different cultural backgrounds, because they had the ability to then introduce the broader public to this literature, and that's really kind of what people like you were doing, and Roger and other people.
Well, and I've got an academic book on Native literature that tries to point out some of these issues, tries to clarify the dialogue, literally.
Right.
And one of the historical perspectives is that Native voices, I mean, we have this Native American literary renaissance that is kind of misnamed because Native voices have been speaking since Guaman Poma de Ayala in, I think, 1508, wrote a letter to the King of Spain from Peru saying, basically, why can't we just get along? We've got our Inca systems, you've got an interesting colonized system, we can manage this together. And here's how.
Right.
And so there, in every century there have been Native voices speaking to the colonizing, colonized mind.
Right.
And trying to get a dialogue going.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty simple.
Well, we just saw each other recently at the president's lecture series where Kevin Young, the African American incredible poet and curator of the African Culture and Art Museum and Smithsonian, was speaking, and he had just recently done a book on 250 years of African American poetry.
That's right.
And that was just amazing. I mean, there were poems, poets that were writing incredible poetry back in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
Right when they were not long after.
Phyllis Wheatley.
Exactly.
Yeah, and others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the voices have always been there, and they've always been speaking, but they've not been heard because they haven't been, they've been silenced to a great extent.
Well, literally.
Yeah, totally.
We don't publish you. I think Phyllis Wheatley had to go to England to find a publisher because nobody would publish her poems during the colonial period.
Right.
And she had these brilliant poems.
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah.
Well, what else you want to share?
Sure. This is a little bit shorter one for dear Mandy Smoker.
Our former Poet Laureate.
Yes. Along with Melissa Kwasny, they shared it, right?
Right.
Both brilliant poets. And Mandy is from my wife's reservation up there at Fort Peck. It's called, I'm not sure I like this title, but its current title is Particular Resonance for M.L. Smoker, which is how she signs her stuff.
Right.
Particular Resonance. We can't name ourselves. The call of home eventually shakes an invitation from the talking leaves of cottonwoods, the pull of water on river shore, voices, eyes dark or light, the calloused skin of children in still foreign schools, their grandmas and uncles trying to focus for them on the whole prairie, all the breaks, bisected by one straight line of indifferent rails and one black road, amid the beer, the meth, the suicides. Not even the two worlds, neither one can name you. Not those of us who learned to live as two, not the ones who never learned or never needed to, but something stone, something round, something always there.
Yeah. The High Line.
Yeah. Highway 2.
Yeah, and the Great Northern. You don't think about that. I mean, we don't typically, our minds aren't
Right.
set that way to think about those kinds of things. But we're thinking about it more and more all the time. We're becoming more and more educated to, I mean, what was it, how many animals a year or something? It's ridiculous.
Oh, God.
Yeah, thousands.
Well, and that's Mandy's project, is to bring that alive. Mm-hmm. And it's one of my favorite things from Jim Welch. James Welch used to visit, I used to have him visit my lit classes at Salish Kootenai College, and I remember he said he started because he wanted to bring the High Line alive. Mm-hmm. He wanted to represent it to the world, and he started with poems, thinking of them like postcards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then that evolved into novels.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but writing the Earth Boy 40, those postcards.
Yeah, they are like postcards.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christmas comes to Moccasin Flats.
That one for Mandy was from 2005. This is a sort of a narrative poem about a moment when I was 8 years old and almost drowned. I think it's
memorable.
Yeah. It's called Autobiography of Drowning. Cold summer salt water in Hood Canal, my youngster legs still uncertain of the depths, yet these same limbs only thicker, now thinking back almost 50 years later. I see the viscous blur of the shore, my sisters, my summer mom alerted to this drowning boy, the yellow light of pebbles and oyster shells reflected from the bottom that had felt solid underfoot, all underwater one more time. And yes, the life behind before me flashing as the thin arms thrash, perhaps a face or two, not much to reflect of those few years, anxious only in the brevity reviewed, not a sense of loss, but something else, open, fluid, of course, before the matter-of-fact rescue and momentary heroism of survival, before the almost gone. Yet is the something flowing only in reflection, or was this a deep voice of water in my lungs, my blood calling my liquid mind, not a throttling or choking, but a smooth conciliation in the throat of water, pouring my own assent in the instant that I died. Kind of reflecting on a moment.
Yeah, drowning is a strange reality, or the fear of drowning.
Yeah.
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 Or in the midst of the fear of
Exactly.
drowning. Yeah, exactly.
It's so vivid. It's amazing how sharp that memory is.
Yeah, yeah, it brings your whole life into perspective quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Here's one. I've been training in Aikido for a lot of years.
Uh-huh.
And this is it's called Aiki Memo. Aikido, you may know, it's the martial art of peace.
Okay.
So you know, it can be kick-ass, but there's no punching. It's basic, and it's not even defensive. It's taking care of the attacker.
Okay.
And neutralizing the situation,
Okay.
bringing it to ground, basically,
Right, right.
where we all begin and end. Aikido means connection of the life force, the way of connecting the life force.
Is it Japanese?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was started by a World War I soldier who agonized over that violence and created, it's really an amazing, beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Aiki memo. My center is a sigh, the line of life and death, where breath is body and body breath. The center is a sigh, a double-edged sword where form is hidden and silence is a word. My center is a sigh, the earth's edge of twilight, where dawn is dusk and color weaves night. The center is a sigh pouring water and fire up and down the spiral of peace and desire. My center is a sigh, a lotus stem must wind down through spinal root, up through petal mind. The center is a sigh, the line of life and death, where breath is body and body breath.
Nice. Yeah. Well, we're getting real close.
I wondered.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there one thing you want to share or anything you want to say before we?
Well, I want to thank you for this
Cool.
opportunity.
Our pleasure.
Yeah.
You're more than welcome. Yeah.
Should we call that a day?
I think we're probably pretty close. It was a pleasure. I'm glad you joined this party and you're a part of the club.
My
which is,
golly, you've really been working hard getting
We'll-
people on.
Well, yeah, and Mandy was one of the people that we haven't been able to catch up to
Oh.
yet. She's awful busy.
She's
I mean,
nonstop.
chasing a thunderous journey around the state and
sure.
so busy in so many ways.
And a busy mom as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. But I can't thank you enough. It's really an
My
honor
pleasure,
and a pleasure.
David. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you
And
for all you do.
You're more than welcome. Join us again for another Poets in Montana somewhere down the line here. See ya.
Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Got a lifetime filled